अस्सलाम वालेकुम, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल। आज हम पढ़ेंगे डिज़ाइन इश्यूज़। सेक्शन 1.4 वी डिस्कस द प्रोमिसेस ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड DBMS टेक्नोलॉजी, हाईलाइटिंग द challenges that need to be overcome in order to realize them. In this section, build on this discussion by presenting the design issues that arise in building a distributed DBMS. These issues will occupy much of the remainder of this book. Distributed database design. The question that is being addressed is how the database and the application that run against it should be placed across the sites. There are two basic alternatives to placing data: partitioned or non-replicated and replicated. In this partition scheme, the database is divided into a number of disjoint partitions, each of which is placed at a different site. Replicated design can be either fully replicated, also called fully duplicated, where the entire database is stored at each site, or partially replicated or partially duplicated, where each partition of the database is stored at more than one site but not at all the sites. The two fundamental design issues are fragmentation, the separation of the database into partitions called fragments, and distribution, the optimum distribution of fragments. The research in this area mostly involves mathematical programming in order to minimize the combined cost of storing the database, processing transaction against it, and message communication among sites. The general problem is NP-hard. Therefore, the processed solutions are based on heuristics. Distributed database design is the topic of chapter 3. Distributed directory management. A directory contains information such as description and location about data items in the database. Problems related to directory management are similar in nature to the database placement problem discussed in the preceding section. A directory may be global to the entire DBMS or local to each site. It can be centralized at one site or distributed over several sites. There can be a single copy or multiple copies. We briefly discussed the issue in chapter 3. Distributed query processing. Query processing deals with designing algorithms that analyze queries and convert them into a series of data manipulation operations. The problem is how to decide on a strategy for executing each query over the network in the most effective way. However, cost is defined. The factors to be considered are the distribution of data, communication cost, and the lack of sufficient locally available information. The objective is to optimize where the inherent parallelism is used to improve the performance of executing the transaction subject to the above mentioned constraint. The problem is NP-hard in nature and approaches are usually heuristic. Distributed query processing is discussed in chapter 6 and 8. Replication. If the distributed database is partially or fully replicated, it is necessary to implement protocols that ensure the consistency of the replicas. Copies of the same data item have the same value. These protocols can be eager in that they force the update to be applied to all the replicas before the transaction complete, or they may be lazy so that the transaction update one copy from which update are propagated to the other after the transaction completes. Relationship among problems. Naturally, these problems are not isolated from one another. Each problem is affected by the solution found for the others and in turn affect the set of feasible solutions for them. In this section, we discuss how they are related. The relationship among the components is shown in figure 1.7. The design of distributed database affect many areas and content influence the processing of queries. वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो लाइक कीजिए, शेयर कीजिए, सब्सक्राइब कीजिए.